Caroline. Fantastic. Isn't it a beautiful day? I'm going to do a very short video back on YouTube again. I really like YouTube a lot, but I haven't done it for a year or two now because I just don't know how to schedule it with the Facebook and everything. But you know what? Just going to keep doing it, and maybe I'll be able to choose a particular time, weekly or every other week, when I do Facebook. So I'll let y'all know. In the meantime, what is art? It's a question that's often been asked in philosophy, especially. You know, we philosophers like to ask these kind of questions. What is art? You know, all these ideas and things. I love it. I'm no longer a philosopher, but the mind has been met and given what it wants, it begins to dissolve. So the philosopher in me is, I love you. I wish you well. Bye. I wish you well. Not to get rid of it, but just to see for what it is, just a play. It's a joke. Philosophy is a joke. Um, well, no, I mean, it's very intense, deep, and I love it. However, it doesn't really talk about truth. When one experiences the truth, or experience some kind of awakening experience, or whatever spiritual experience, some enlightenment, whatever enlightenment, what happens oftentimes is that the mind wants to understand it, and it creates philosophies out of it. This is where I believe philosophies were born. Mystics talking and people listening, and they made a system out of it. But whoever was saying it was not a philosopher. At most, a contemplative, perhaps. Contemplation and philosophy are very different. Contemplation is the art and science of going within. Philosophy is just mind stuff. For example, in contemplation, one asks the question, who am I? In philosophy, one begins to think. That's the difference. One begins to think, who am I? And that's a mistake. And that's what perhaps happened to Western world with Descartes. Remember Descartes? Those of you studied history, whatever you want to call it, or science or philosophy, Descartes. He said that he thinks, therefore he is. It's a big mistake. That means one is in the ego, in the mind, completely, if one believes that, especially. So, contemplation is a deeper phenomenon. It's like going from mind to oneness. However, it's a different approach. One asks a question and one waits for the answer to come from within. So there are people who are very contemplative, and if they are taken into the world and they misguided, they might start looking for the answer out there in philosophy classes or textbooks. However, if they're true contemplatives, they may read. Even if one reads philosophy, there's nothing wrong in it. It's fine to read philosophy. However, one has to be aware there's no truth in it. One has to discover it. Every time, every moment, one has to discover it, this being, and rediscover it, and deepen into it, and deepen into it to oneness, to infinity, till one is no longer. It's like existence takes one over completely. This is the journey we are on. So the universe takes over our body, mind, spirit, soul. All of it will dissolve into the oneness, into the truth. So if one can ask the question, of course, who am I? And one waits. Contemplation actually is meditation, very connected. One can just sit, ask the question, and sit and wait for the answer to come. That's what meditation actually is. You ask a question or not, or you can just sit. If you're ready, you feel like you're aware that the answer is not in the mind. You don't even have to ask the question. But you can contemplate the question, and then one sits in silence in meditation, practice techniques to still the mind so that the answer can come to the surface. Because our minds are so busy that the truth is always here, but the mind prevents it from being seen. All the noise, the emotions, the thoughts, the feelings, the ideas. This is not to say that the mind is to be neglected or ignored, or it's not important. No, of course it's important. Existence is very smart, intelligent, creative. There's a ladder on the human mind, and in the book that's coming out, just the diagrams mostly. The book is, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, complete. I may put a couple of things here and there, but it's a complete book. What is not yet complete are the diagrams. So I'm going to show you the visual diagrams in the book that describes the level of awareness. If one grows in intelligence, I'm not talking about the magical physical body. That's just the senses. the sex, the desire for sex or romantic love, wanting to be with somebody physically or touch them, the pain, the sadness of the emotional body. That's the pain body. It's better to call it pain body than physical body, actually. It's pain body. Much of it is pain, is sadness from the inner child. This pain sits on the inner child. So when one is triggered on the inner child layer, what happens is these emotions also get triggered to help to distract one from the primary pain, which is more painful. The emotional pain, body can be pain, anxious, sad, miserable, whatever it is. However, the pain of the inner child, unless one experiences it, is what everyone is avoiding. Scary. It's the scariest thing. Fear of abandonment and loneliness. That's the root of it. However, the emotional level, one may feel sad, left, abandoned, whatever. However, on the deep, 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 deep inner child, this is a deep level of abandonment when one feels left completely. This is the pain body at its root. On the surface is the pain, the anxieties, when people are together, romantically, there's also pain there. One misses the person. That's painful to miss somebody. It's emotion. This is a part of the trauma when the mother was not there, her existence was not seen. It was childhood. So that one is on the surface level, more superficial level. What I'm describing is the emotional body, psychological body, which is deeper. It is the ego proper, in my view. It's the ego, the one that's watching the physical, the magical body. For example, let's say one indulges in food because one is anxious or the inner child has been triggered. One feels alone, abandoned. One starts eating. That's the physical part. There are feelings in the physical body too. Can't you see? There are physical sensations and emotions, very superficial, but they can be quite painful too. But watching it is the mind. The mind is the one. That's the mind saying, "How could you have eaten? I can't believe you just fell for this. Oh my goodness, you need to do better than this." But everyone is different, you know. However, as one grows in intelligence, in the ladder of being, of the ladder of mental development, at a point one becomes a philosopher. Some people never get there, unfortunately, because they never were allowed to develop that part of themselves. Because modern men and women has been forced to work and work and work and work and work. If one is working or busy or running around having fun, partying, drinking, whatever, one lives on the surface life. And those who want to control humanity, they're totally fine with that. In fact, they want it. However, the mind develops once that's critical thinking. At a point, the intelligence becomes now, even if one becomes a great scientist, one begins to say, but who's the scientist? Who is it? That's contemplation. That's the deeper layer of science. When the scientist is just looking out there, superficial, but when he or she turns inward into the contemplative level and begins to ask the question, but who am I? Who's this scientist? So every scientist needs to also be a philosopher. The philosopher doesn't have to be a scientist because he or she will not choose to create stuff. However, everyone needs to be a philosopher, a contemplative, I would say, to ask the necessary questions. Who am I? The only thing is don't start believing whatever the mind says. One has to meditate. This is the beauty of contemplation and wait for the answer to come. The answer will come as an experience more than likely. If it comes as a word or thought, it's not the truth. It comes as an experience. Suddenly one is aware of it. That is where contemplation has done its job. Someone like Atolia, for example, was a born philosopher, more than likely. He had a question at the back of his mind. And then one day it got answered. Say, who am I? This is who I am. So as scientists, I recommend to also be philosophers. Then, like Einstein was both. He was a scientist, but also a philosopher. So philosophy is deep. Everyone. Again, some people are born with great levels of interest in philosophy and contemplation. Everyone has it, though, more or less. Some people have it a lot. Like from a young age, that was my biggest. Who am I? Why am I here? I was also a mystic. I would just sit sometimes as a child, just be it, and ask a question, just be it. So the mystic and the philosopher in me. But what I noticed is many people don't have that. Or they do, but it matured much later. So I'm grateful to the universe that for me it matured at a very young age. Or maybe I was born with it. Just who am I? Why bother living? What's the point? Why bother living? If I don't know who I am, what's the point of all this? Do I die? All those questions, everyone has to ask them. But just don't depend on your mind to tell you the answer. Okay? And then you get the truth. Take a deep breath. I have a business meeting right now. I'll see you guys. More videos to come. Blessings.